Hey there guys and gals, Anime Dude here, and today I'm going to be doing something that I've never done before. Try to convince you, that's right, you, to watch a currently airing anime. While I've always done these why you should watch videos on completed series that are less popular than I believe they should be, today I'm just going to talk about a series I've really enjoyed over the last couple years, and that series is Shield Hero. Now while there's not a ton of episodes out on it yet, and some of you may be wondering how I can recommend for you to watch a series that's not even done airing, it's best to remember that I am a man of the highest class. For you see, not only have I read all of the chapters of the web novel, but recently I also read the first 5 volumes of the light novels. When doing so, I noticed that some of the storyline alterations that were made in the light novel version are simply fantastic. Stuff that was rather plain but still entertaining enough in the web novel is changed to become much more complex and engaging for the audience. Certain key events transpire in much more exciting ways, great new characters are introduced, and characters that we already know and love are given extra depth within their backstories. The story has been refined to an impressive degree, and there's also the fact that a series has to be good or at least fun for me to spend as much time on it as I have. After all, there's dang near 400 chapters in the web novel, and I started over from scratch after getting busy and stopping midway once. Then, I read the first 5 volumes of the light novels, and each one has at least 300 pages. Now, I'm watching the anime week to week, and while you'd think I'd be tired of the series by now, I'm actually enjoying it a lot. So much so that I'm actually making a video trying to convince others to watch it as well. Speaking of which, I plan on making this video free of any major spoilers past like maybe the first couple episodes of the anime. But just know that if you do decide to read ahead in the novels, I doubt you'll end up regretting it. I think the anime has been adapted pretty well so far, but if you think you grow attached to some of the characters throughout the duration of an episode like most people did in episode 2, then just know that so much of what happened in that episode was a summarized version of events that glosses over a lot of important details. I mean, don't get me wrong, montages can be great for showing us the passage of time while speeding up a story's pace, and I think the anime actually utilizes that capability really well. But when each event that was briefly shown has a lot more depth to it, that depth helps you to appreciate the character and their development so much more. Novels aren't for everyone, but if you do enjoy reading, then this is a series that I really recommend checking out. Anyways, I guess we should go ahead and get started. So this is why you should watch/read The Rising of the Shield Hero. The Rising of the Shield Hero has a plot that's pretty standard for an isekai. You have an otaku who is magically transported into a fantasy world, but I think the execution of how this series handles that generic concept helps to place it above most others. You see, our protagonist is transported there to be one of 4 heroes. And like most isekai protagonists, Naofumi is a bright-eyed youth that's excited at the prospect of going on an adventure and being a hero. However, there's a couple things that help to distance him from any other isekai protagonists out there. First of all, he may have the potential to be overpowered since he's a hero, but he's overpowered in a very specific way. As the title of the series suggests, he's the shield hero, and that leaves him very reliant on the support and attack power of others since his own is basically non-existent. Likewise, you'll seldom see him trying to take care of everything by himself like a lot of other overpowered protagonists tend to do. That concept is pretty cool and helps to build up the importance of the supporting cast. However, what really makes it work so well is what happens when he's betrayed in a major way, and therefore loses his ability to trust in others. Now at this point, we have a hero that is forced to rely on others, but is unable to trust anybody but himself. And it's that initial issue that helps to solidify his intriguing personality, as well as make this otherwise generic setup feel fresh. Now while I personally love the twist on how this story starts out, I know plenty of people that have had their complaints about it, and while I don't want to dwell on them for too long or call anyone out, those complaints are one of the primary reasons I decided to make this video. If you are interested in hearing some more about some of the slander given to this series early on, then I'll leave some links down in the description to some other videos that do a better job of addressing it, so feel free to go check them out. Anyways, while I'm not going to go into detail on what people have said what, I do want to briefly talk about what a majority of the slander was about. I mean, even though it's a bit of a spoiler for the first episode, it's such a relevant plot point that I can't really not talk about it. So when Naofumi was betrayed, it's because his first companion falsely accused him of rape. I can't tell you how many people I've heard complain about how that's a terrible way to start a story. And the biggest cries of controversy that the videos I linked to earlier address more specifically seem to come from the fact that the series started out with a false rape accusation. Now, I'll be the first to admit that from the outside looking in, this series seems like it definitely has some things worthy of controversy, but I guess I never really thought that the false rape accusation would be one of them. I'm gonna be straightforward here. Rape is terrible, and false accusations of rape are equally as terrible, as they not only pin a horrendous crime on someone innocent, but they make things much more difficult on those that were actually victims of assault. However, I think the biggest issue that people had here was how seldom false accusations actually happen in comparison to victims having their claims questioned. Regardless, they do happen, and in this instance, it may ease some worries to know that it's not meant to be taken as a representation of women as a whole. Actually, far from it. You see, he was the victim of a premeditated accusation by a terrible individual, and while it may just be because I've read later parts of the novels that shed more light on the matter, I don't think it's really an issue that anyone should be too overly concerned about. It's not some attempt at social commentary, but rather it's simply a part of the story, and I believe authors shouldn't feel obligated to censor what they include in their stories based on the public opinion of the subject matter. Speaking of which, I guess I should go ahead and talk a bit about the things I figured might actually be controversial going in. And honestly, even I'm still not completely used to one of them. The one thing I doubt I'll ever fully get over is the fact that most of the girls the main character finds himself interacting with are young. While the main heroine eventually looks like she's about 17 to 18, she's actually a demi-human whose body develops differently from a normal human's. And thus, she's only really been alive for about 10 years. Now that looks really bad from the outside looking in, and so I figured there'd be some controversy there. But let me assure you that while it may seem weird to us, it seems equally as weird to Naofumi, and his internal dialogue in the novels lets us know that he's also aware that it probably looks bad from the outside looking in. However, after being falsely accused of rape, romance is the furthest thing from his mind, and his internal dialogue, at least in the light novels, clues us in on the fact that any feelings he develops for his companions are more paternal than anything else. That made a huge difference to me personally, but I feel like I'm starting to get too into spoiler territory, so I digress. The second thing I felt might be of controversy was the initial solution he found to solving his dilemma that we discussed earlier. He needed someone capable of attacking for him, but also someone that couldn't betray him. Therefore, when the opportunity to make a trip down to the slave market presented itself, he didn't hesitate to take it. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Not only are there slaves in this fantasy world, but our main character becomes a slave owner. I'm sure there's people out there that drop the show upon finding that out, but trust me, if you do so, you're doing yourself a disservice. I recommend giving it at least a couple more episodes to watch how that plays out. Even though it still somehow exists in parts of our world, I think any decent human being can agree that slavery, and the history of it, is a horrible thing. Likewise, I feel like I might have acted the same way the other heroes do when they find out that Naofumi owns one. However, don't let the fact that this fantasy world still allows something that's been a part of our own for many hundreds if not thousands of years be the one thing that turns you off from giving this series a chance. If the inclusion of slavery was all it took for a series to be considered bad, then nobody would watch shows like Game of Thrones or Star Wars. If you can make it to the end of episode 4 and still be offended by the concepts presented in regards to the story, then yeah, you may as well drop it. But I highly doubt that'll be what you decide to do. I find the idea that this little isekai series is a social commentary against women or an endorsement of slavery or anything of that sort really to be humorous at best. But I will say that this series does somewhat tackle the concept of discrimination in regards to race. More specifically, it tackles the discrimination between the human and demi-human races, and I think the anime has made an attempt to express that aspect to the fullest. In the second episode, we see a sign on a restaurant that says it doesn't serve demi-humans. Now this is one of the few changes I noticed from the light novels, as I don't remember that being a thing when I read through them. Oh, I guess that could just be my memory failing me. Anyways, I think it's a great small addition on the animator's part, as it helps to highlight the discrimination found against demi-humans in the country we're first exposed to. By doing so, it helps to build the world up in a way that foreshadows future events. Within the first few episodes, I also noticed that the anime took some creative liberties in regards to the fights and battles, making most of them more believable and engaging in the process. There's a lot of movies and series out there that fall flat after being altered and adapted into a new medium, and too often it's due to poor choices in what changes are made. While this particular series hasn't been airing for long, and it's had to skim over a lot of details in the portion it has covered, I feel as if it's actually done a really good job so far of choosing what to leave out, as well as choosing what additions need to be made in order to make it engaging as an animated series. I say this because when adapting an existing work, it's important to stay faithful to the work's original intentions, but it's equally important to be willing to make any necessary changes. So far, I feel as if Kinema Citrus, the studio that made the Shield Hero anime, has done an amazing job of just that. If I had to say a change I was disappointed in, then know that you may be spoiled on events in episode 4, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then just skip to the timestamp shown on the screen. Alright, are you all good? Are those of you still here ready for this spoiler? Well, if you are, then let me tell you that when light novel Naofumi duels Matayasu, he doesn't just threaten to deal damage to Matayasu's face and manhood like he does in the anime. Oh no. He actually pins him down with balloons, puts a couple on his face and crotch, and then proceeds to put his weight onto the balloons he'd thrown onto his crotch, so that they really dig their teeth in. The best part is that Naofumi knew he couldn't win the fight, so he was just determined to make Matayasu as miserable as possible, and the entirety of the fight just seemed way more comedic and pathetic than the cool fight we actually got in the anime. Okay, end of spoiler. And if that one didn't make you want to read the novels, then I don't know what will. Another one of the major changes I noticed was them mentioning that only heroes had status magic back in episode 1, whereas in the novels everyone has access to it. I wasn't sure if that was just a mistake or if it'll actually result in some changes down the line, but either way, I guess I'm supposed to be convincing you to give this series a try, not going over all the minor differences I noticed in the adaptation. So, let's get back on track a bit, shall we? This story has a few potentially controversial aspects to it that we've talked about, and with those in mind, why should you watch/read The Shield Hero? For one, it's one of the top-rated shows in a strong winter 2019 season, and it's actually becoming even more popular than I thought it would. While I personally prefer the novels, I stand by the statement that it's being adapted really well, and I can guarantee you anything that you think may be a plot hole from episode 1 is likely explained later on down the line. Trust me, I saw a lot of people trying to call this show out on things that didn't seem to fit or make sense after only one episode, and out of all the complaints I saw, there were 0 claims that I couldn't have explained by referencing spoilers from the light novels. World building is something gradual that takes time, and while the world of Shield Hero may not be the most detailed or complex, I think it's actually crafted pretty dang well. I don't think it's anywhere near One Piece levels of greatness, but trust me when I say it's definitely better than it appears to be after only a few episodes. So, now that we've discussed a bit about the plot, setting, potentially controversial elements, and even some of the differences between the different versions of the story, it's finally time to talk about the characters in this series. Naofumi, the main character, is far from a saint, and he may actually seem more like a villain rather than a hero at times, but he's a pretty good guy towards those that he cares about. Honestly, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that he's one of the most realistic and relatable isekai protagonists I've ever seen. Simply seeing the betrayal in episode 1 turn him from a naive and bright-eyed guy to an embodiment of rage that's falling into a deep depression is quite the development. Likewise, seeing him try to prepare for and survive the waves as he gradually learns to trust and care for others again is quite the reward. I don't want to give too much away, but just trust me when I say he's a good character, okay? The main heroine is named Raphtalia, and while she's a bit young, she's also a great character in her own right. Not long after she was introduced, I feel like the entirety of the anime community came to a unanimous agreement that she was already a precious best girl candidate and that she must be protected at all costs. Speaking of best girl candidates, I also want to talk a bit about Firo, who is also one of my favorite characters in the series. She's like an endless supply of great and natural comic relief all to herself. I don't want to spoil too much about her character since she doesn't appear until around episode 5, but just keep an eye out for her, and then come back and try to tell me that she's not the most annoyingly adorable thing you ever did get to know. Lastly, I want to talk about Matayasu, Ren, and Itsuki, who are the spear, sword, and bow heroes respectively. I think they are some of the more weakly written characters if I'm completely honest, but even they each have their own flaws and traits that help to characterize them individually. Those unique characteristics help to explain a lot about how each of their parties operate. Actually, it may not be fair to call them poorly written, since they are so distinct from one another in how they both view and handle various things. As a quick example, I'll tell you a bit about my favorite of the 3. I don't think any of this is a big spoiler by any means, but feel free to skip to the specified time if you'd rather know as little as possible. Okay, you good? So Ren, the sword hero, uses his prior game knowledge to simply tell his party members where they should go each day to efficiently level up. After doing so, he then goes off on his own and fights solo. Despite the cool lone wolf facade he tries to keep up, he gives off the impression of an edgy teenager trying his best to be like his idol, Kirito, from Sword Art Online. Alright, that was the end of the Ren spoilers, so back to talking about the three heroes as a whole. They all think they know more than they actually do, and they're frustratingly stubborn and set in their ways to a ridiculous extent. This may not actually be too unrealistic for young gamers that believe they are chosen heroes of a fantasy world, especially considering they each believe the world is exactly like a game they've played before. Also, they treat Naofumi as a villain, but between their initial surroundings that do the same, and the fact that he was accused of rape shortly after they were transported there, I can kinda see why they would do that as well. I think they just seem like wasted potential to me because of the crazy extent to which their stubbornness and ignorance take root, but if nothing else, they could be seen as a satirical take that parodies some of the typical and terrible isekai protagonists out there. Anyways, I think that just about sums up everything I wanted to say. I know this was kind of a weird video, as I probably spent more time addressing the issues that people have found with the first couple episodes, rather than discussing why the series itself is such an enjoyable ride. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is my first time doing a Why You Should Watch video on a more popular series, and also my first time doing it for a currently airing series. So I guess I just feel that it's a shame that people are dropping it so early on for all the wrong reasons. While I don't think it's a masterpiece by any means, I think it can be a really fun series once you get into it. Also, while it's garnered the popularity to convince a lot of people to watch it without me making a video on it, I guess this video is more so for the people that have still been hesitant to do so, as well as the people that would otherwise dismiss it because of its seemingly generic plot or arguably sensitive subject matter. As I always say though, there's no one series that's right for everyone, so if this doesn't sound like the series for you, then feel free to go check out some of my other Why You Should Watch videos. Maybe a different series like Alduraman on the Sky or Major will be right up your alley. Anyways, I guess I should probably end the video now. So as always, thank you all so much for watching. Remember to praise the sundress, and Anime Dude out.